Okay, hello everyone. I'm here with my main man, Amos Woolen. So, have you ever, all zero of you, have you ever wondered what would happen if Matt Dillahunty was confronted with the anthropic argument? And by the way, for people in the chat, let me know if you can hear me all right, because I want you to hear me. Well, Amos, actually, for those who don't know, who are you?
I'm Amos. I'm Matthew's best friend. He's not my best friend. I have a blog called Going AWOL, link below, and I'm excited to watch this video.
Yeah. So have you ever wondered what would happen if, well, I already kind of said that, but I didn't fully get to because I got distracted. But okay, so it turns out you don't have to wonder what would happen if Matt Dillahunty was confronted with the anthropic argument, because we know what would happen if Matt Dillahunty was confronted with the anthropic argument, because it just happened. I called in to the atheist experience, one of the intellectual pinnacles of the sort of intellectual side of atheism.
Wait. You haven't demonstrated that it's so much possible for it to be the pinnacle of the intellectual side of atheism.
Right. So, and by the way, people in the chat, let me know if my audio's okay. My mic broke, so it might be worse than normal, but hopefully it's still fine. And Amos is sort of quiet and exhibits pusillanimity. So it might be hard to hear him. Wow, the cutie on the right. Yeah, it's Amos.
Oh, Joe, stop it.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. Nice seeing you. Okay, so I called in the atheist experience to talk about the anthropic argument. It was very funny. In particular, there were numerous devastating objections leveled, such that I don't know if I can raise the anthropic argument anymore. We've been debunked. So okay, let's see what happened.
Welcome, Matthew. You're on with me and Mandisa.
Yeah, hey, nice to meet you.
Wow, that guy, the guy talking he has a sexy and powerful voice.
So the new argument for the existence of God is called the anthropic argument.
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second.
About how one reasons. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it was just a momentary hiccup. I just wanted to state it again.
Sounds good. So anthropics is about how one does probabilistic reasoning about the fact of their own existence. So there's a principle of anthropic reasoning known as the self-indication assumption. And the basic idea behind the self-indication assumption is that your existence is likelier if more people exist. So for example, suppose that a coin gets flipped. If it comes up heads, one person gets created. And if it comes up tails, 10 people get created. Suppose that you get created from this process. The self-indication assumption holds that you should think that it's 10 times likelier that the coin came up tails, because the idea is that if the coin came up tails, it's 10 times as likelier that you would come to exist. Now, I'll be happy to argue for the self-indication assumption.
Oh, would I? Would I be happy to argue for the self-indication assumption? For more on this, see my exactly 5 million articles on the self-indication assumption. By the way, Amos was allegedly going to write about the self-indication assumption.
And I will.
But he's been dropping the ball. It's been months. We've all been waiting. The people, they cry out. They say, please, we want articles about the self-indication assumption.
The article that I'm drafting is titled, I'll self-indicate your assumption. So subscribe and stay tuned.
Yeah. Amos, you wouldn't think it from talking to him, but he actually has a pretty good blog. He knows a thing or two about philosophy. Certainly more than our friend, Mr. Dillahunty, or as Canadian Catholic once referred to him, Matt Dillahunty. But okay.
Canadian Catholic also knows a thing or two about philosophy. Either one thing or two.
This is right.
Overview of the argument. Now, suppose we grant this. Well, if we have a God who wants to create and has unlimited ability to create, then you get, in expectation, lots more people than atheism. And so then you get a major probabilistic update in favor of theism over atheism, in particular because the number of possible people is some very large infinity. An omnipotent God would be capable of creating that and would want to create that given the goodness of creation. But in contrast, if there is no God, it's very unlikely that you would get, maybe you'd get infinite people, but at best a small infinite worth of people. It's highly unlikely that you would get the large infinite of people enough.
By the way, for people watching, if you're just listening, I would encourage you to watch, because Mandisa's facial expressions are perhaps the best part of it. Like, they're very funny. They're very worth watching. Very amusing.
Why is it that you say, now I'd have to go back. By the way, are you saying entropic argument or anthropic argument?
This guy really understands what's going on.
You said anthropic.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's
Yeah.
typed up in the screening thing. It's entropic. My apology. So, why is it that in a universe that is not governed or created by God, you don't think you would get to a large number of people, or do you just think that it's more likely in a universe governed by God than one that's not?
That's a good question.
So I want to be clear that I'm not talking about in any particular universe. I think you might get some more numbers of people in any particular universe that are created by God and not God. The thing that I'm saying you get more of is if you have an omnipotent God, he can create a really, really large multiverse that can create some ginormous infinity worth of people. It's harder to see how you get a very large infinity worth of people. If you look at the existing multiverse models, for example, they tend to get you either a finite number of people or the smallest infinity worth of people.
Whoa.
God can
Don't
create
we
any
don't we have a
infinity worth.
no? Don't we have a finite number of people?
How did we never think of this? Aren't there only a five? The problem is we didn't check census statistics. So we thought that if you sort of checked the global census, the number of people that it would say would be uncountably infinite.
I mean, I think Matt is speaking for himself when he says we have a finite number of people. He's talking about the atheist experience in their audience, but that's not true of us.
That's right. Yeah. Now, so we didn't sort of check population statistics. We assumed that there were infinite people when in fact there are a finite number. The argument, it's toast. Oh, wait, what? Why is there no audio?
There is a finite number of people on Earth, certainly. My claim is that across the multiverse, there's an infinite number of people.
I'm not aware that there is a multiverse.
Neither is she. You can tell by her eyebrows. Right. So that's why I gave an argument for the multiverse. I mean, it's very funny, I give an argument for a God who creates this big multiverse, and his response was sort of aggressively and condescendingly being like, well, I'm not aware there is such a multiverse.
Look, okay, I think that every question they raise is a fine question to ask, and no such thing as a stupid question in this context. However, I think that it's just a function of the way that they do their show, that they can't kind of ask questions in a chill way and just sort of check what you mean. In about 3 minutes, they have to have dropped the zinger, and they have to have gotten angry, and they have to have yelled you off the phone. And so, that stops it from being a normal conversation.
This is true.
Well, the argument gives you a reason to think there is a multiverse. If you accept the self-indication assumption that your existence is quite clear if there are more people.
Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Such a funny thing. Ha ha ha! Oh, the argument tells you there's a multiverse. Ha ha!
You're a funny guy.
Let me chuckle at that.
Then if there's a giant multiverse, then your existence is infinitely likelier.
Is it more likely?
Now maybe we can talk about reasons.
Is it more likely for you to get a royal flush if I'm cheating than if I'm not?
Yes.
If you get a royal flush, does that tell you whether or not I'm cheating?
No, it doesn't single-handedly.
And so
It wasn't a great example because the odds that I would get a royal flush, it's not clear how they're affected by him cheating. Maybe him cheating would make it likelier that he would get a royal flush.
Well, I mean, usually people who are cheating at cards, there's the dealer who's cheating, and then there's their compatriot who the other card players don't know is teaming up with the other guy. Because if the dealer keeps dealing themselves royal flushes, it's more
I guess this is possible, but it's like the analogy could be a little cleaner. And we're gonna see Matt.
I think you don't know what you're talking about, and I think he caught you with your pants down, and that's just how card cheating works.
Yeah, actually, your mother caught me with my pants.
Oh, damn, this live stream.
So looking at the universe and seeing a finite number of people and not having any reason to suspect that there's a multiverse.
Do we have reason to suspect that there's a multiverse? Do you think I would grant that based on the argument that we have no reason to suspect there's a multiverse when the argument is that your existence is likelier given a multiverse by a factor of infinity?
I think it's just that he hasn't clocked that that's an entailment of the argument yet, which is fine to do. It's a hard thing to wrap your head around at first, but I think it's just, the format of the show means that he has to get angry with you instead of ask those questions.
Right. I mean, it's a little silly, he has to sort of act like you're a moron before he has any idea what's going on, when it is in fact he who doesn't have any idea what's going on.
I don't see how you can appeal to a multiverse, but the mere fact that there are that those are possibilities even if it were more likely on God than on not God, you have exactly one universe to investigate and explore. How do you show whether this is the universe that was just unlikely or the one that's because of God?
Right. So it's sometimes worth believing improbable hypotheses.
No, it's not.
So like, in the royal flush case.
Wow, he really destroyed me. He didn't let me get to the end of my sentence, where what I was going to say was that it's sometimes worth believing hypotheses that are improbable regarding their prior probabilities if they will explain the evidence.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. No, you always, if it has a low prior, you never believe it, no matter how much evidence there is.
Well, no, I mean, theism doesn't just have a low prior, it has no prior.
It doesn't have any prior. But as we're going to see later in the stream, Dillahunty claims that not only does my view have a low prior, he says I don't have any priors. None. Look under a rock. You'll never find a prior.
Sorry.
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
You have no way.
Okay.
You have no way of calculating or approximating probability, and you're not answering my question.
Wait, sorry. Okay, repeat what the question was.
Wait, sorry. I do want to go back because it is like. Do you know what the question was?
No.
Yeah, like it wasn't a very clear question. Let's see.
How do you show whether this is the universe that was just unlikely?
4 epicycles.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the question.
Likely on God than on not God, you have exactly one universe to investigate and explore. How do you show whether this is the universe that was just unlikely or the one that's because of God?
Would you like to answer that now?
Well, what you do is you consider the evidence and you consider the priors. So you make arguments for why theism doesn't have a low prior, and then you look at how much evidence there is.
You haven't shown that there is any evidence, or the evidence is even possible.
So,
that theism even has a
like
prior,
this, by the way, is the way. Like there are lots of people who are suspicious of this. It's just how you figure anything out, right? So, for example, suppose you're just interested in a historical question. Suppose you want to figure out, like, I don't know, who wrote the Gospels. What you do is you consider the arguments for why for the traditional authorship, and the arguments against the traditional authorship. Then you see which case is stronger. There's no magic, you first have to demonstrate it, like via the scientific method. You just consider the evidence on both sides and see which has more evidence.
Right. So it's sometimes worth believing improbable hypotheses.
Ooh, another beating. They're replaying this clip of me taking a bad beating at the hands of a fellow man.
Hypotheses.
No, it's not.
So like, in the royal flush case. Sorry.
No, it's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
You have no way.
Okay.
You have no way of calculating or approximating probability, and you're not answering my question.
Wait, sorry. Okay, repeat what the question was.
No.
Wow.
Okay.
Andisa wants to get in, and I'm done repeating myself to people who aren't.
I'm just very confused about the multiverses and how this proves that there's a God. And which God are you referring to? Which God are you talking about?
Yeah, actually, the anthropic argument, it specifically proves Muhammad. It's an argument for a very, very specific God. Muhammad specifically. No,
my understanding of Islam, which isn't comprehensive, is that Muslims don't believe that Muhammad is God.
Allah. But Allah is just the name for God. Wow, we're really.
Yeah, okay. I think Mandisa's approach is the right one, where Mandisa and Matt are clearly both as confused as one another about the argument that you're giving, which is fine because it's a complicated argument. And Mandisa is like, I'm just sort of confused about this, whereas Matt, pretends not to be confused.
No, Mandisa's fine.
Yeah.
I much prefer Mandisa's approach of just sort of humbly asking questions, combined with when Matt makes a confused point about why I'm allegedly wrong, being like nodding along, and then when I make a point, being like, but doing this sort of the Tucker look like. But no, I much prefer Mandisa to Matt, at least in her approach to this conversation. Reeked. I didn't mean to click that, but.
Right, so I'm a generic theist. So I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Jew. I just think that there is an all-powerful God that created the universe.
You're not a Muslim.
I know, shocking.
And I think this argument, it doesn't single-handedly establish that, but it certainly raises the probability of that. Now,
but you said that you could.
Regarding the multiverse.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Uh-huh.
Mandisa is just so much more pleasant than Matt.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Matt,
but both Matts, because you were just speaking over a woman for no reason. I mean, she was about to ask a question.
yeah. I mean, to be clear, I was not trying to interrupt, but there was a bit of lag. You can see after they ask a question, there's like a 2-second gap before I answer it. So there is a decent amount of lag. So
there was a lag of respect on your end.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
We're listening.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Regarding multiverse, the thought is that we do have evidence for a multiverse. If your existence is likelier in 10 universes than it is in one, and it's likelier if there are 1,000 universes than if there are 10, then if there are infinite universes, then your existence is infinitely likelier. And so if there's a multiverse, then it's way likelier that you would come to exist. Like if there's just one universe, what are the odds that you would be one of the billion-ish people, or the few billion people who happen to exist in that one universe?
The mistake here is that you are.
Just can you let me finish the sentence? Like what? Just Matt needs to I don't know. I remember in the there's some people who you think this guy, if he just smoked a lot of marijuana, I'd much prefer him. This is how I feel about Matt. He needs to sort of chill out.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd have to say somebody on the Atheist Experience should smoke more marijuana, but in this case,
right. If only Matt was obsessed with drugs. You're obsessed with drugs. You brought me here under false pretenses. Amos, do you feel as though I brought you here under false pretenses?
I do.
You said we would review 3 things: the video, the monarchy, and religion. You brought me here. We talked for 45 minutes about the video. It's been nothing but drugs. You're obsessed with drugs.
Okay, I'd recommend Googling Peter Hitchens or Alex O'Connor. You're obsessed with drugs.
Also, I have a guest post on my blog written by Peter Hitchens, which I point people to.
It's true. And by true, I mean false.
You are presuming a particular conclusion that has occurred. The probability of me existing is 1. How likely or unlikely it was, given some alternate set of circumstances or amongst a variety of different universes that may or may not have occurred or could have occurred, is irrelevant.
Amos, what do you think about this response? If you learn something, then it's a prior probability of 1, so it can't be evidence for any hypothesis. Is this good probabilistic reasoning?
This is. I mean, I'd ask Matt, is the fact that you exist evidence that your father wasn't sterile at the time that he had sex with your mother, getting her pregnant? Seems as though it should be, right? So, the fact that you exist can give you evidence for certain claims that are logically distinct from the claim that you exist. And if that's true in the reproductive case, it might be true in this case too.
Right. So I give a similar analogy later in the show. I say, imagine we're playing poker and I get 10 royal flushes. They're like, wow, I think you're cheating because the probability of you getting 10 royal flushes, given that you're not cheating, is 1 in several 100,000. It's 1 in a number with a lot of zeros. I say, whoa. I already got the royal flushes. So the overall probability is 1. This would not be correct probabilistic reasoning. What Dillahunty's error is exactly the same. And it's embarrassing that in decades of doing this, he doesn't have the most basic understanding of epistemology.
I think that it's an understandable thought to think in this case, because what he's probably thinking is that he has Cartesian certainty that he exists, and so the epistemic probability that he exists is 1, and so therefore you can't get any evidence for anything else based on the fact that you exist. And so I can see how you would have this thought in the case of your existence in the way that you wouldn't have the same thought in the case of the poker game. But I think it's clear that
right. Okay,
your
so
existence can give you evidence for
right. The thing is, similar points come up with regards to fine tuning, right? When discussing fine tuning, this is a response that people make. It's a demonstrably flawed response, right? So imagine in the poker game, right? Imagine there's a poker game and your parents would only have sex if they got 10 royal flushes. The fact that they did get 10 royal flushes is evidence of cheating, even though had they not done that, you wouldn't be around, right? So it's demonstrably mistaken probabilistic reasoning. And Matt Dillahunty has been doing debates about atheism, has been doing call-in shows for, I don't know exactly how long, but since I was at least 10, he ought to know better. If this is what he's doing all day, and he claims to be some, bastion of correct epistemology. He should know the first thing about epistemology and not make these basic errors. And I think it's embarrassing that basically he's still making these errors. Do you agree? Do you think, would you be embarrassed?
Maybe. I mean, I guess, you know, there's a problem with sort of calling it embarrassing, which is, you know, it's probably this kind of rhetoric that leads Matt to get angry at callers instead of considering their arguments fairly. You know, I mean, it's like the fear of getting embarrassed and getting owned and having to think, oh yeah, you know, that's an interesting point, I'll get back to you in 10 minutes. That's, you know, probably leading to the way in which he conducts himself during these shows. You know, I don't think it's embarrassing to make philosophical mistakes. But you know, I guess, and also like, it's true that he's been doing a radio show for a very long time, but garbage in, garbage out. I mean, you know, like you wouldn't expect to learn epistemology from like very dumb callers who are kind of calling you up.
If you're this confident in your views about the world, and you don't know the first thing about epistemology, you don't know the first thing about any of the subjects that you discuss, I think that's a little bit embarrassing. It would be one thing if he were just like, you know, a sort of amateur who, you know, sort of like, it's like, okay, you know, I don't think there's a God, but was very humble about it. But if he's this arrogant, this condescending, you know, cuts me off to say, your mistake is, and then he's the one who's making a mistake so basic that anyone remotely versed in philosophy or religion, or in having given any thought to these subjects, would have recognized that it's a mistake. I think that's a little embarrassing.
That's why I think Mandisa ought to take his job. I mean, she's much better at this. You know, she has the right attitude.
No, Mandisa, I'm big Mandisa fan, certainly compared to Matt. And her facial expressions, they really bring great joy to this otherwise.
If people are just listening, you know, she's doing these kind of nods every time Matt makes a point, and then, you know, every time Matthew makes a point, she just sort of starts like shaking her head and chuckling.
Yeah, no, it's funny. But okay, let's continue.
Probability of me existing is 1, and that's true whether I'm in the universe where it's unlikely and there is no multiverse and there is no God or anything else. That is true 100%, whether I'm in that universe or whether I'm in the universe that is the result of a God. How do you tell the difference between those two universes?
So imagine, well, the way we tell a difference between the two universes is that the universe that has a God is much likelier to have you. So after coming to exist,
no, sir. You are making an assertion about how likely something is. I'm saying, given the observation, how do you conclude which of the two you are offering two candidate explanations for an observation? I do not accept that you have offered candidate explanations, but I realize that you think you have candidate explanations because
I haven't even offered a candidate explanation. Of your existence. There's one explanation of your existence, which is that there's one universe. I haven't, according to Matt, I haven't even proposed a second alternative, like that there's a multiverse. I haven't even said that.
I mean, I think he just doubts the coherence of the explanations that you've offered. So
maybe you should explain why it's incoherent.
And maybe you should explain why it's possible.
Yeah.
A demonstration that a God is even possible or likely.
Pause for a sec. It is funny because this is one thing that's annoying about Matt, where he'll you know, you talk for 20 seconds, he cuts you off, then he monologues for 3 minutes, then he asks you a question, you start answering the question, then he cuts you off, and so you can't address the things he says in his monologue. Now, regarding this point about order, you first have to demonstrate that it's possible before you can use it as an explanation. This is not how anything works.
Well, okay, so I mean, you know, there's a reason like Swinburne, you know, starts his series with the coherence of theism and then goes on to the existence of God, right? So there's a debate to be had first about whether theism is a coherent hypothesis,
right?
And then, you know, once that's in the bag, you know, it's fine to plug God in as a hypothesis. But
right. So if there's some reason to doubt that the view is possible, then okay, right. Then you have to address those challenges. But you don't have to like preemptively, like the default is thinking that things are possible. If there's an objection to its possibility, then you have to answer that.
So the default is thinking that something is possible if it's imaginable or conceivable, right? And then, you know, so like, okay, I can imagine that God exists, and then it's Matt's job to kind of point to incoherences and the things I'm imagining.
Right. So if you're claiming, I mean, you know, I think much of the talk about burden of proof is silly. But this is one of the cases where I actually think, you know, something like the burden of proof makes sense. Where if you're the one who's saying something is impossible, the burden of proof is on you, right? Most things are possible, you know. If you can sort of picture it, there has to be some reason why it's impossible. So then the burden of proof is on you to establish why it's impossible. Like how does one go about demonstrating that something is possible? So for example, Sandals says, "Oh, I can imagine dragons." Yeah, dragons are possible. They're not real, but they're possible. They're not like square circles, which not only aren't real but couldn't be real. So for example, with Einstein, he had his theories about space-time bending. He didn't first be like, okay, first I demonstrate that this thing is possible. What he did is he gathered evidence for it. And if you have enough evidence for it, then if there's not a sound reason to doubt it, then you should think it's possible. Like, how does Matt think that that proposing new hypotheses works? Like, suppose a person's like, okay, I have this new theory in physics. First, let me do modal metaphysics and prove that it's possible, and then we'll talk about whether it explains the data. It's just very silly. It's not how anything works. It's a good applause line where it's like, you haven't even demonstrated that it's possible, but it's not how anything in science works.
Also, so you can get evidence that something is possible by getting evidence that it's actual, because actuality entails possibility. So suppose you're kind of on the fence about whether theism is metaphysically possible. Well, if there's evidence that seems to confirm theism, or that would confirm theism if theism were possible, that will like raise the probability that theism is possible exactly to the degree that it raises the probability that theism is actually true.
Yes, this is right. There were certain people who thought that split brain cases in philosophy of mind were impossible. And one way we learned that was wrong is that there are some of them.
Or that a multiverse is possible or likely. However, if you list two candidate explanations that I exist, or that a God exists or a God doesn't exist, how likely I am under either one of those is irrelevant if we begin with the observation, I exist. How do you determine which of those is most likely to be the correct answer?
Okay, so here's an analogy that would perhaps be helpful. Suppose that you and I are playing poker, and I get 10 rolls.
She knows.
Yeah.
Mandisa knows it won't be helpful. She's already anticipated it.
Royal flushes in a row. And you say, look, one Matt to another, you say, I think you're cheating because the odds of me getting 10 royal flushes in a row by chance are so low. But in contrast, if I'm cheating, it's much likelier that I would get 10 royal flushes in a row. And I say to you, whoa, we already know the odds. We already know I did get 10 royal flushes. So the odds are 1. That wouldn't be very convincing, because even though we know that it did happen, we can look at how likely it would be to happen on different hypotheses. Analogously, we know that you exist, but we can look at how likely it is that you would exist if there is a God.
No, stop, Matthew. Matt.
Stop.
Matthew, stop.
Stop. Wait, Abe, let's say something.
Well,
Stop. Sorry, continue.
Your mom.
Stop.
Okay.
No, we know there's a demonstration that someone can cheat at cards.
But does he not see that he's sliding around, right? So he makes 10 points. I respond to the point that he made where he says that the probability is already 1, right? Because we know I exist. So I say, that doesn't matter. In the poker case, you already know that you got a royal, you already know you got 10 royal flushes, but nonetheless, we can look at the probability of you getting 10 royal flushes on the different hypotheses. And so now he says, stop, before I can address his other points, and then raises a different point.
So, on the cards thing specifically, just imagine the first card game, and imagine in the first card game, somebody cheats for the first time. So you never observed an instance of somebody cheating at cards before, but you can imagine someone cheating at cards, and so prima facie, that's evidence that it's possible for someone to cheat at cards. And so if somebody gets 10 consecutive royal flushes in a row, that's going to be evidence that cheating has gone on, even if you've never seen someone cheat before, and so you've never kind of confirmed that it's possible because it's been actual before.
Right. Also, the other thing that's funny is that his view, it requires some kind of frequentism, right? So suppose I get 10 royal flushes in a row. You say, you accuse me of cheating. And I say, demonstrate, you've never demonstrated that it's possible that I cheat. Yes, other people cheat, but you've never demonstrated that I cheat. There are no other examples of it. Like, in any case, right, any specific event, any event that's highly specific will have never happened before because it's so specific, right? So that I cheat in poker. So, even if I cheated in poker before, right, that I cheat in poker today has never happened before. It's just very confused epistemologically. He's confused about epistemology, ontology, metaphysics, modality.
Or to quote Lydia McGrew, it is a bad epistemological joke.
This is a bad epistemological joke. Now, the Gospel of John, I think, is highly reliable as reportage for coming directly from the eyewitnesses.
Of the beholder.
If one takes a look at the undecided coincidences in the Gospel of John. For the record, I'm not making fun of Lydia McGrew. Okay,
Yeah,
I think
we're
yeah,
huge fans. Of
yeah,
Lydia McGrew
we're
on this
the
channel.
McGrewiacs.
Yeah, that's true. Also, people should subscribe to Bethel McGrew's Substack.
Yeah, it's okay.
And deal
Really
you
well. I
File
think it's a good
flash.
blog.
You do not know that it's possible for an all-powerful being to exist and create universes. You do not get to consider that a candidate explanation and compare its likelihood when you have no demonstration that it's possible or likely.
Okay, so imagine the second coming happens. Jesus comes down and declares, that it's the end times, and he ushers in, peace on earth, and the seven-headed beast turns out to be real, but all these things happen exactly in accordance with the Bible. Would Matt say, "Oh, you haven't even demonstrated that God is possible"? No, because there's no reason to rule out it being possible. And when you get really good evidence for something, even if you all previously thought it was impossible, then you should think, okay, I now have really good evidence for the thing, so now I think that it's possible.
So wait, on Matt's view, wouldn't he say that the fact that he's observed like a divine action directly confirms that it's possible?
Well, how does he know it's a divine action?
Oh, right, yeah. So
he hasn't even demonstrated that it's possible that it's a divine action.
Sure.
It's just clown car epistemology. And by the way, if you tried to apply this epistemology to anything in history or science or any other serious field, you wouldn't know anything, right? This would rule out any kind of knowledge about anything, because anytime you give evidence for something, you could say, "Oh, you haven't even demonstrated this thing is possible first," or "Oh, you haven't demonstrated."
Well, I don't regard history and science as serious fields. You're supposed to just discern the truths, the necessary truths.
A priori, yeah, fair.
You can't begin with a known.
Matter, for instance,
you cannot begin.
So regarding the
No, I didn't say fuck all about dark matter, did I, Matt?
Oh
no, I was making a point about dark matter.
And Lisa does not like it when you make points about dark matter.
This was a funny clip.
Yeah.
Okay, so I start making an analogy about dark matter where I say, look, with dark matter, we looked at its effects and we concluded, look, based on the way gravity is exerted and the shifting of light and so on and so forth, and the fact that it seems like gravity, based on how rapidly gravities rotate, it seems like they have more mass than we can observe. All this is explained by gravities having a bunch of invisible matter, right? Okay, and Matt says,
I didn't say fuck all about dark matter.
Cannot begin.
So regarding the
No, I didn't say fuck all about dark matter, did I, Matt?
Oh
no, I was making a point.
and Lisa's so disappointed in me for making an analogy about dark matter. There are all these people making analogies about dark matter.
About dark matter.
I'm
Sorry.
not asking you to make a point about dark matter. I'm asking you to address the fact that you just asserted. Is my existence even more likely if there's a
See, but he jumps around so much. Now he's making a different point, right? About whether his existence is likelier if there's a fairy. Just give me the fucking time to answer.
I didn't say fuck all about fairies.
Yeah. I mean, he's just such an unpleasant bloviator who's very difficult to have a conversation with.
particularly powerful extra-dimensional fairy who definitely wanted to make a world where I exist? Is it more like
Wow. Yes, I literally think this is the same Matthew who has a YouTube channel called The Liberation Under Ideal Conditions.
Matthew is reading a comment in the live
with
chat.
Bayes' theorem. Yes.
You're obsessed with Bayes' theorem. You brought me here for 45 minutes, talked about nothing but Bayes' theorem. You said you would talk about Bayes' theorem, drugs, and the monarchy. You're obsessed with Bayes' theorem.
likely on that than on God?
I'm considering something non-demonstrable. Non-demonstrable.
No.
Matt frustrated with a dumb spelled D-U-M. Color, water is wet, etc. No comma before etc.
Like, I'm not a grammar
God?
Nazi.
Yes, but we have to look both.
So,
at how
no, there's no
theory is
but.
to explain the data
There's no
and
but.
prior-
Mandisa agrees. There's
Yeah.
not.
There's
There's no but.
No but at all.
It's so funny.
We
I
have
just
to look both.
I love
So,
your facial.
no, there's no
Theory is
but.
to explain the data
There's no
and
but.
No but.
probability.
There's no but.
No.
You just acknowledged that I came up with a scenario that's more likely than God. Do you believe that one?
You're cooked.
No, I don't think that's more likely.
No,
than
you
God.
don't. You don't. So now we're into special pleading land where you,
Yes. If there are two hypotheses and they explain some data point equally well, but you don't have an equal credence in them, that's the special pleading fallacy. Very funny.
you are picking an explanation that isn't demonstrated to be possible, isn't demonstrated to be likely. You have no evidence to demonstrate at all. And you're saying that despite the fact that I just came up with one that's more likely to result in the observation, that you're still going to go with your all-powerful God.
He got you there.
Right, because when you evaluate a hypothesis, you want to look not merely at how well it explains the data, but you want to look at its prior probability, which is how likely it is before you look at the data. Now, the
You
prior
have no
probability
priors.
of a fair
Mendoza doesn't like priors.
probability, which is how likely it is before you look at the data. Now, the
You
prior
have no
probability
priors.
of a fairy
You
is
have
very low,
you
and
have
a
zero priors for God. You have zero priors
No priors. I don't know many. Where am I? What am I?
for God. You cannot use Bayesian analysis to conclude God's likelihood. And you've already acknowledged that the scenario I came up with is more probable in the metaphorical, not metaphorical, but
Here I really stumped, Matt.
metaphorical, metaphorical, not
I think
metaphorical,
he's
but
trying to say metaphysics.
in the shit. Sorry,
Apology rejected. Never do that.
you've already
Metaphorical?
acknowledged.
Which
You've
are-
already you have already acknowledged that I came up with a scenario that is on its face a more probable, that the observation is more likely under that one than under God. And now you're going for God based on prior probabilities. But you don't have any prior probabilities. You cannot do in a Bayesian. What's the likelihood that a God exists under Bayesian analysis?
See, he says 5 things, then asks you a question. It's just so fucking frustrating. I don't know.
Well, I don't know exactly the odds.
Oh, you
nobody
don't know
does.
exactly the odds.
Yeah, this is true of nearly anything, right? So suppose I get 10 royal flushes in a row. You say, "Oh, I think you're cheating," and I say, "Oh, tell me exactly the odds I'm cheating."
I know the odds.
Yeah. Tell me the 5 decimal places the probability that I'm
I
cheating.
can do that. I just don't want to right now.
Yeah. Oh. You think the dark matter exists? What are the odds the dark matter exists? You think you can never but you want to ideal reasoning roughly approximates Bayesian reasoning, but you don't just apply Bayes' theorem to everything where you're like, okay, I start with my prior of this and then I plug in the numbers. I mean, that can be a helpful exercise, but you rarely have exact numbers, right? Yeah. Okay. Sandil says, what are the odds that hockey exists? I don't know, very high, but I don't know exactly. Actually, as a meteorological nihilist, Amos is a hockey denier.
That's right.
How is it possible to calculate the odds?
Right. Well, so the way that you calculate odds generally is you look at the prior probability by taking into account considerations like simplicity,
No.
elegance,
No.
and
No, stop. No.
You did not take simplicity into account.
No,
when you look
Matthew.
at how well it
Calculating
explains
the odds is not a Bayesian assessment. Calculating the odds of instances is what are the demonstrably possible outcomes, and then how often does this particular outcome come up? That's how you calculate odds.
Okay, so how do you calculate the odds that say, I don't know, that Thales of Miletus, I think he was from Miletus, existed? Oh, you don't have some sample space of
No, I mean, he looks at every time that Thales of Miletus has existed in the past, okay, and then he shows that it's possible, and then he shows that it explains.
What you do is you look at the fact that, okay, a guy with his description existing isn't that unlikely, and a bunch of people write about him, so you think, okay, he probably existed. You don't have that much writing. It's a bit late, so maybe he didn't, but it's pretty likely.
I don't think that's the only
Well, I hope Matt's enjoying his red juice. I don't know what that is, but it looks interesting.
way to calculate odds. So the point I was trying to make earlier about
This person donated $1,000. Is that what ARS is? Wow.
Money well spent.
Yeah, they could have saved the life of about a fifth of a child.
dark matter So in the discovery of dark matter, what physicists noticed was that there are events in physics that are very mysterious and that can be explained very nicely if we posit that there's a kind of invisible matter that exerts gravitational waves. And they looked at lots and lots of different things that could be explained by that hypothesis. And so they didn't previously do anything like, they didn't have some independent demonstration that this was possible, nor did they have some precise way of calculating the odds. But they said, look, we have this non-particularly ad hoc hypothesis, and it explains the data really well, and so we think it's true. Similarly, I think when it comes to God, we have this non-ad hoc hypothesis that there's a mind of the very simplest sort, and then it very nicely explains.
Those were channeling Swinburne there. Well, we have a mind of the very simplest sort, that is to say, a mind wholly without limits. Now, suppose we have some hypothesis according to which it explains the data.
Lots of different lines of data. Here I've only presented one of them. But so for that reason, I think, it's a pretty good bet.
Okay. I don't.
Yeah, I don't either.
Not only that, but you're.
Wow. Well, they think it's not a good bet. How will I recover? Like, you give an argument for a thing that if right massively raises the probability. They don't reject any of the premises. They say confused stuff about epistemology and cut you off before you can explain why it's confused. And then you explain, and then you.
Look, they did reject some of the premises. Matt rejected the premise that theism has a prior.
This is true. Okay, fair.
Betting on an absolutely useless, no-risk proposition because you're not picking a god. You just think, oh.
Yeah, when you say X is a good bet, do you mean you're literally betting on it, or do you mean X is likely?
I assume you meant bet in the epistemic sense, and now he's talking about bet in the pragmatic sense.
I think it's a safe bet that there's a supreme being. You'll never be proved wrong or right, as far as we know. So congratulations.
Well, I think on mine.
So congratulations on smelling your own farts and saying, you know what? They used to speculate that something like dark matter existed long before it was demonstrated. But let me ask you this, Matthew. Was it?
It's just so outrageous,
I want to congratulate you on smelling your own farts.
He monologues for a minute and then asks a question. And then if I try to respond to what he said before the question, then he's like, I'm not answering the question. Verbs. He's just such a very nasty guy. I talked to the totally failed podcaster, and he had a call-in show. Matt Dillahunty, he was a very angry guy. I said to him, Matt, you need to calm down. Maybe you need to stop being so angry. He does a lot of yelling, probably at a level that people probably would not believe. Now he says, you have to prove it's possible. We probably proved it possible more than anybody in a long time.
Justifiable to believe that dark matter existed before it was confirmed?
No.
I incorrectly answered that question.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, I think it was. So it depends on what you mean by confirmation. Mm-hmm. It turns out that in epistemology, there isn't some precise bar of, this has been confirmed. Rather, you get more and more evidence for it. So before it was confirmed, quote unquote, before it was firmly established, we still had a decent amount of evidence for it. So at that point, it was still probably pretty reasonable to believe. Immediately before you get to the point where it's confirmed, where it's pretty thoroughly beyond doubt. Well, you still have a lot of evidence for it.
Yeah, the name for what Matthew was talking about is confirmation theory. So there's a sense of confirmed, which is just you get evidence for it. And we had evidence for dark matter in the sense that it was a theoretical postulate, but it explained lots of data apparently.
Yeah. By the way, I would love to have a long debate with Matt Dillahunty about the existence of God. Okay, I think that would be very funny, and I think if he couldn't interrupt and bloviate with the impunity that he does, I think the debate would go a lot worse for him than I think that debate would go rather poorly for him, because when he talks with a guy who knows anything about the subjects that he talks about, tends not to go great, given that he doesn't.
But no. Call me back when you confirm God. I'm not interested in navel gazing speculations. Why are you talking over me? Call me back when you confirm God in the same way that dark matter was confirmed.
Well, I don't think God would have the same kind of evidence that dark matter would have.
Not my problem.
Similar.
Not my
Again,
problem. Not my fucking problem. That's your problem that you picked an analogy that fails because you want to get into special pleading. Suggest
Matthew picks analogy, fails.
Okay,
Yeah.
so suppose I make the following claim. I say there's no evidence for anything. And you're like, what? And you give an example of there being evidence for something. Well, okay, imagine you argue for the existence of God. And I say, no, there's no evidence for God because there's no evidence for anything. And you're like, oh, what about evidence for evolution? And I say, oh, you picked a bad analogy. The evidence for evolution is different from the evidence for God. Yes, the kind of evidence is different. Like, he just wasn't tracking the point. The point was, regarding dark matter, we came to believe in dark matter because it explained the data. Even we didn't first demonstrate that it was possible. We didn't we saw a lot of data that it explained, and we realized it was this non-ad hoc hypothesis. So we said, okay, there's dark matter. Similarly with theism, there's a lot of data that it explains. And so, lol, what a bunch of incels. I can tell you this is not true. But anyways, for Amos in particular, Amos is beloved by women the world over.
Touch me.
But Matt Dillahunty's here. Matt, if you want to come on, Matt, I would love. I don't know if you're the real Matt Dillahunty. If you would like to come on, I would love to talk about the anthropic argument. To talk more, where you can't sort of bloviate and interrupt with the impunity that you did. I will put in the description a link to the StreamYard, and you are more than free to come on. Okay, you're live streaming on Twitch right now. Okay, I'd be happy to talk with you on Twitch. I found, I think when you interrupt a lot, which you do on your call-in shows, then then the discussions tend to be less productive. But so I don't know if I plan to call in again. But if you would like to come on the show and argue against the anthropic argument or against many of the other arguments for the existence of God, from fine-tuning, well, look, okay, you're not interested in liners. Look, I think you're not interested in a debate where there's a fair playing field, right? I think you're not interested in a debate insofar as you can't interrupt with impunity, insofar as you can't make 10 points, then ask a question, and that, then when the person starts trying to address the points, then you accuse them of not listening. That's what I think you're not interested in. Now, if you disagree, feel free to come on and we can have a conversation about the anthropic argument, about many arguments for the existence of God. I think that would be a lot of fun. It could, would be a nice Twitch video. But yeah, it seems like you're not interested in that. I'd be happy to have a formal debate, or a debate with a serious moderator if you would like. Rather than, a debate where you can basically mute with impunity and be aggressive and talk over people. You Are Whining is so delicious. I could dry if I wasn't dead inside. Wow. Yeah. So substantiate my whining.
That's a good question. Why is your voice so high pitched? Actually.
Yeah, I don't know. It's true. I do have a very nasally voice. I saw people in the chat. They said I sounded like Richard Carrier, which I thought was funny. Richard Carrier, he's an interesting guy. I think he's right to apply Bayes' theorem to stuff. The problem is the details. He ends up applying Bayes' theorem incorrectly and making poor arguments. But Matthew, your voice is beautiful. Don't listen to them. Wow, so powerful. Okay, should we keep watching the stream?
Coming from Spray Cheese.
If Dillahunty doesn't want to call in, it would be. I think a Dillahunty call in would be very funny. I'm hoping that happens, but unfortunately, it does not look like it's going to.
That an all-powerful God shouldn't have evidence for it the way dark matter was. Then you picked a bad fucking analogy because
that's a bad analogy, Patrick.
Yeah, get it together. You have picked a bad analogy.
Yeah. Wow. This is really. I feel like there's a duality between the Matts. The Matts are both streaming. Yeah.
Stop fucking interrupting me. Stop fucking interrupting me.
See, this is what happens when you try to address his points. He monologues for 5 minutes, and then if you want to make a point, then he says, "Stop fucking interrupting me." And, he gets very angry. Now, it turns out that this is not very conducive to a conversation, because normally in a conversation, you want, when the person makes a point, you want to be able to address the point. But if you can't interrupt him, and then he goes on for 5 minutes and then asks you one question, then, it's
Matthew,
it's
you
not-
weren't interested in a conversation. You were interested in smelling your own farts.
It's true. By the way, okay, Gabriel Teo says the anthropic argument is also it's also known as the observation selection effect. This is not true. The observation selection effect is a different thing. The anthropic argument, I have a long blog post. If people want to go to Bentham's newsletter and talk about talk about the anthropic argument.
Maybe the anthropic argument is reputed to be the observation selection effect, but knowledge is factive. So
right. By the way, so the offer of of people coming in to explain where they think is wrong with the anthropic argument. Wait, I don't know, Amos, if you're down.
yeah,
Are you down for other people to call in? I'm happy.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to call in, I think I put a link to the live stream, to the StreamYard link in the chat. If people think they have identified something wrong with the anthropic argument, particularly if you think that I was debunked by Dillahunty, that anything that he said was remotely convincing as a response, please call in. We want to hear from you. So okay, I guess I can explain the anthropic argument. Wait, I'm gonna go to Dillahunty's Twitch. Let's see. Matt Dillahunty Twitch. Matt Dillahunty. Is he? It's intended for certain audiences. Okay. But
should we just kind of react to the end of the?
Oh, I mean, I think it's basically done. But sure, yeah, let's.
You picked a bad analogy because dark matter is something that is observable and testable. At least,
yeah, dark matter is so observable.
Have you ever observed dark matter? I mean, I heard someone that dark matter isn't invisible, but
right. Dark matter, by definition, is not observable. That's why it's called dark. You can't see it. The reason we think there is dark matter is that there are certain patterns of data that don't make sense if there isn't dark matter. So you can look at the amount of matter of like the gravitational exertion of different galaxies. And they seem to exert more gravitational pull than they would if they just had the observable mass. And you can look, there are particular areas where it seems like there's a gravitational field that distorts some bit of light. And so that, there are quite a few different bits of evidence for dark matter, but none of it is in the form of like, we found some in a laboratory and observed it directly. Instead, we conclude that it's true because we indirectly observed it through its effects.
Well, speak for yourself. I think I've observed some dark matter.
Yeah, let's see. Is Dillahunty, what's he saying? Okay, I mean, we could react to the Dillahunty stream, but
that's inception.
Dark matter can be observed, though. Well, maybe it can be observed in principle, right? But that's not how we've found out that it existed, right? No one has ever observed dark matter. We have not found any in a laboratory, nor have we ever seen it. It's dark. It's invisible. The entire dark matter thesis is that there's a kind of invisible matter that exerts a gravitational pull, but that you can't see.
At least in principle. They didn't just pull something out of their ass. Physicists did.
Is God observable, at least in principle? Yes, God is.
And just say, you know what? We got a problem with our model. Let's imagine there's a God. They didn't do that.
Right, because the probability of the things that look as if they're from dark matter given God aren't higher than given that they aren't.
They imagined a potential explanation that was consistent with the observations and potential within the known universe. You are reaching beyond any of that to a realm of magic.
I'm not maybe I'm wrong, but I would think epistemology applies the same in the known universe. And so if there's something that licenses you to think there's a kind of thing in the known universe, I would think it also licenses you So to think that the thing exists outside the known universe. By the way, all 40-ish people watching, if any of you think Dillahunty made a good objection to the Anthropic agreement, please call in. We want to hear from you, especially Dillahunty. I would especially like to hear from you, Monsieur Dillahunty.
I don't imagine he's watching because he's probably talking
Right.
on his.
Well, if anyone is watching both shows, let
Okay,
Dillahunty
we have
know.
a good question. If SIA is true, why don't I understand it?
I don't know. Things can be true and not understood by you.
Logic and buffoonery that you can't even demonstrate is likely or possible. Call me back when you can.
Well, okay. So regarding the point,
No, I said call me back when you can.
No.
No.
I'm not the one picking bad analogies.
That's a bad
You
analogy.
didn't have to go with dark matter, but you did. In the entire history of the world, there's been absolutely no point at any time when anyone has demonstrated anything supernatural or anything beyond the bounds.
Well, if demonstrated is just giving, strong evidence for it, made it reasonable to believe, then he's just begging the question. I think I did demonstrate it. I gave an argument, which if it's right.
Okay, I think you're abusing the term begging the question. I mean, he's just like asserting his view that no one has ever demonstrated anything.
But he's asserting it as if it refutes it.
Um,
Isn't that a personal incredulity fallacy? I maybe Matt's committing. I don't know. I also don't think that being
I don't think that's a fallacy.
right. Like if you have no idea how something happened, and if it seems ridiculous that it could happen, that actually does give you a reason to think it probably did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
But okay.
Of space-time. Just a fact. So you can sit there and say, you know what? I'm just convinced that.
Yeah, that's the end of the show. Okay. All right. Should we review the Dillahunty? I didn't expect Matt to call in. That was funny. Should we see what's going on in the stream?
Yeah, we can watch it for a few minutes. It might not be prime content. Maybe we could do another stream another time.
Matt Dillahunty Twitch. Okay, let's see.
Because it wasn't a.
Wait, I'm gonna reload it.
There ain't nobody. Name another atheist in the movement that has so consistently for so long eagerly walked into churches, Christian organizations. I've debated in more churches than most Christian debaters have.
Gabriel's asking for a short synopsis of the anthropic argument.
Yeah,
Maybe
sure.
now's a good time to do that.
Okay, so the basic idea. So there's a principle called, if you want the longer story, I have an article on my blog, which is linked below, that is very long and goes through. And
also a video on YouTube, right? 20-minute explainer.
Right. Yes, I have a video on YouTube explaining it. I think I have shorter articles. Now, so the basic idea is, so there's a principle called the self-indication assumption. And what the self-indication assumption says is that your existence is likelier if there are more people. So for example, suppose that a coin gets flipped. If it comes up heads, one person gets created. And if it comes up tails, 10 people get created. SIA holds that you should think that tails is 10 times likelier than heads. Now, suppose that we grant this. And there are a bunch of arguments for this, but okay, let's just suppose that we grant this for a moment. Well, if your existence is 10 times likelier if there are 10 people and 100 times likelier if there are 100 people, then if there are infinite people, your existence is infinitely likelier. And in fact, if there's a really big infinity worth of people, then your existence is infinitely likelier than if there are only those small infinites worth of people. So then, if that's right, from the fact that you exist, you get an infinitely strong probabilistic update in favor of thinking that there's a big infinity of people. And then theism is a good explanation of that. If there's a perfect God who wants to create stuff, it makes sense that there would be infinite people. Well, if there is no God, then that doesn't make any sense. It's very unlikely, conditional on there being no God, that there would be that many people. So the idea is that because a God with limitless power could create a big multiverse, the probability of there being that many people given a limitless God is higher than given a not limitless God. Okay, was that a good explanation? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the first objection that most people think of is, well, like, why wouldn't this apply to anything? So, if I'm if I'm observing this mug, right, like, doesn't that give me evidence that there's a very large infinity of mugs out there in the world? And so, like, the answer is no, right? So it's true that if there were infinitely many mugs, that would make the existence of this mug in particular infinitely more likely. But if there are infinitely many mugs, that will also make the probability that I would observe this mug lower proportionately. And so it cancels out, and I don't get evidence from observing this mug that there are infinitely many mugs. By contrast, I'm directly aware of my own existence. So if I exist, I'm the first to know. And so from the fact that I exist, if the self-indication assumption is true, that gives me evidence that there are lots of people. And theism gets you more people than other theories.
Yeah, okay. Zisel Nagy says the anthropic principal is just another form of survival bias. Well, I've never heard of the anthropic principal, but I've heard of the anthropic principle. No, so it's just probabilistic reasoning about your existence. It's likelier that you would come to exist if there are more people, just like, if you pull 10 eggs out of a basket, it's likelier that any particular egg would be pulled out of the basket. And I mean, maybe it would be helpful to sketch out one argument for SIA. Okay, suppose we reject SIA. Consider a sample case. One person gets created, then a coin gets flipped, and if it comes up tails, 9 other people get created. Now, suppose you reject SIA. Well, you'll think, prior to learning you're the first person, your credence, you think heads and tails are equally likely because your existence isn't likelier if there are more people. Now, suppose you're informed that you're the first person. Well, the odds that you'd be the first person, given that there are 10 people, is 1 in 10. So if you start out indifferent and then learn something that's 10 times as likely if the coin comes up heads than tails, now you think at 10 to 1 odds, the fair coin that hasn't been flipped yet will come up heads. And by changing the numbers around, you can get even more absurd results where you become arbitrarily certain of this. And by the way, this is an argument I've published on. I have a published paper in a prestigious peer-reviewed journal on the anthropic argument. So, not on the anthropic argument, but on the self-indication assumption and why it's true. So, anyways, I'm ignoring the eggs not being in the basket. Powerful. Right? I was just an analogy to make it.
Well, I mean, the eggs are supposed to be analogous to people. So, this implies that there are no people if there are no eggs in the basket.
Right. Does the anthropic argument work if we assume materialism, no souls? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So, maybe we should explain how. So, yeah, the argument will work even if you start out with a very high prior or just like a high credence assigned to materialism. As long you might think the following. You might think that if materialism is true, it's going to be impossible for all possible people to be created because the creation of some people will rule out the creation of other possible people, right? So, assuming we're material objects, we occupy a region of space, and me developing in one region of space will rule out somebody else developing in that region of space. So, if my mother gets pregnant with me, that rules out her getting pregnant during the same time with another person. And so you might think if materialism is true, that rules out the possibility that all possible people would exist. Okay. But I think, the most plausible version of the self-indication assumption, the unrestricted self-indication assumption, according to which you get evidence from your existence, not only that there's a greater share of possible people, but that there's just like a greater sheer number of possible people. This will give you evidence not only that a greater share of possible people exists, but for metaphysical views on which more possible people could exist and do. And so what this will mean is that you can go into the argument with a very high credence in materialism, but if the argument goes through, it will turn out that on dualism, more people could exist than on materialism. And if you combine dualism with theism, more people could exist and do. And so you start out with a high credence in materialism, but then the argument, if it works, should cause you to update in favor of theism and dualism.
I also think even if you stick to materialism, the argument works fine on materialism. You don't have to think every possible person gets created. The idea is just, look, if God makes a giant multiverse, he makes way more people than atheism. And so the odds of your existence are higher. The way to think about SIA, and this is sort of the probabilistic basis for it. Okay, let's consider a simple case. Let's say that a coin gets flipped, and if it comes up heads, John and Jack get created. And if it comes up tails, just John gets created. The idea is, well, the probability that the coin comes up heads and that you're John equals the probability that the coin comes up tails and you're John. And the probability that the coin comes up heads and you're John equals the probability that the coin comes up heads and you're Jack. So in total, heads is just twice as likely as John. Okay. Truver Shu says, I still don't think I've heard a good response to, if I exist, then I have a 100% chance of existing. I'm not getting this argument at all. Yeah, it's a complicated argument. It's hard to get your head around. But the response to this is that even if some event you already know it happened, so there's a 100% chance of existing, that doesn't mean that it can't be evidence for a hypothesis, right? So think back to the royal flush case. I get 10 royal flushes in poker. You accuse me of cheating. And I say, no. You can't say that it's unlikely that I would get 10 royal flushes if I wasn't cheating. We already know I got 10 royal flushes. The odds are 100%. This would not be correct because when we talk about conditional probability, how likely something is given the hypothesis, you're not talking about it having happened.
Yeah, and so like an analogy we gave earlier that kind of explicitly connects to you existing. So, you exist. Presumably that fact gives you evidence that your parents weren't infertile, right? So even if you're kind of directly aware of your existence and you have Cartesian certainty that you exist, that can still be evidence for hypotheses that would make it more or less likely that that fact would obtain, namely that you would exist. And so just as your existence could give you evidence that your parents weren't infertile, it seems like if this argument works, your existence could give you evidence that there are many more people.
Right. Gabriel Shield says, God is a necessary nature to create an infinite number of people. Why can't a not conscious foundation of reality have a necessary nature to create an infinite number of people? Right. So the idea is we're not adding this as an extra arbitrary ad hoc stipulation to God. Theists already think that there's a God of limitless power, knowledge, and goodness. And that's a very simple hypothesis because it's the hypothesis that there's a mind of the very simplest sort, namely a mind completely without limits. Now, once you already have that, then there's a positive expectation that God would create infinite people because it's good to create. In contrast, on naturalism, the theories on which there's a disposition to create a huge infinity worth of people is a very small slice of probability space. So it's large evidence for theism.
I mean, so just to make the claim clear, Matthew's saying that theism has a higher prior probability than like these non-theistic hypotheses that by stipulation predict that all possible people exist.
Right. And even if you think there's a fine naturalistic explanation, but the point is, given that this is likely given theism, it'll be evidence for theism, even if there's some other way to explain it. Like there are often multiple ways of explaining some data.
Can we scroll up and address another comment before we address the one immediately below?
I do want to see what Matt's saying.
Yeah, I mean, so Zolt Nagy said we're ignoring being such as Santa Claus, Harry Potter, married bachelors, and that God of yours. What do you make of this?
Well, so the theist says that your existence is likelier if there are more people. It doesn't say that all imaginable creatures have to exist, right? The idea is just, look, from the fact that you exist, you get evidence that there are more people. And so from your existence, you should think that there's the biggest infinity, the most number of people that there could be, and then that favors theism. You don't have to think that every imaginable creature will exist. And in fact, now you might actually think that every possible person exists if you think there are souls. So maybe God creates every possible soul. I'm sympathetic to that. But even if not, all you need is just that way more people get created on theism than on naturalism.
Yeah. And, so like it might be true that we're ignoring married bachelors because, they're married. It's improper. But, I mean, it's not the case that I'm, ignoring the other characters across the board. I'm currently writing a paper and a book about Santa Claus, for example.
Which you should check out his blog.
Yeah, definitely.
As well. Okay. Okay.
Should we look at Frank?
Okay, Frank92 says, hey, Matthew, can this argument work for pantheism as much as it does for deism? Well, it's not deism, it's theism, because it's the hypothesis there is a perfect being. If you just have an indifferent designer who makes the universe, then there's no reason to expect it to create infinite people. Gabriel Tio says, a necessary nature needs no explanation if necessary. We're just positing that an explanation is necessary isn't an explanation of why it's that way. So, for example, if you're a determinist and you see a person get 10 royal flushes in a row, it's not a good explanation to say, well, it's necessary that they get 10 royal flushes in a row, because it's improbable that that would be necessary. Blake says, my contention is that under materialism, a small infinity is enough to ensure the existence of all humans. That's demonstrably wrong. Under materialism, assuming you think the number of ways of rearranging people, of rearranging bits of matter is at the very least uncountably infinite and probably more. In particular, if you think that any bit of that matter can be duplicated in infinite any number of times, then there's no set of all possible people. And so it's just not true. For more on this, David Lewis wrote about this a bit, and I talk about it in depth in my post called like The Anthropic Argument, a Comprehensive Guide. Needs no explanation. It just is. I just explained what was wrong with that. Don't need to decide. No, I mean, okay, you're just repeating yourselves. What's between matter and antimatter? Between Matthew and anti-Matthew? I don't understand this comment. This doesn't seem like an objection. Why would a perfect being create a being like Gollum in Lord of the Rings? Well, I think the theists would need some explanation why there's evil. If you want to see more details, see my most recent blog post. Matthew, have you formulated the anthropic argument with an infinite universe rather than a multi-universe before? No, I think atheism can get a single infinite universe. You need some very, very large form of multiverse in order to get enough people.
Yeah, but can we go back to Sandal's comment? I feel like that wasn't fully addressed. So, like, presumably the thought is, okay, if God creates all possible people, Gollum from Lord of the Rings is among the possible people. And why would he create a being like that? Because he's like, Smeagol, my precious! Right, so it's sort of, I don't know, like, it's sort of an instance of evil, maybe gratuitous.
That was just an instance of evil. Okay, I get it. Right, so you don't have to think God creates every possible person. All you need to think is that God creates lots of people that you might presently be, some large infinity worth of people like that, and then you get the right answer. Like, what matters on theism isn't like my existence isn't affected by the number of golems or shrimps that God creates. My existence is only affected by the number of people that I might presently be for the reasons that I described before, where just like you split your credence across the people that you might be. So like for, in the coin flip case, if a coin gets flipped, heads, one person gets created, tails, 10 people get created. Well, because you might be any of the 10 people, you should think it's 10 times likelier that you would exist. In contrast, if tails would only make 10 shrimp, well, then you should think it's heads, because heads predicts more people that you might present.
And so you might think, okay, the self-indication assumption doesn't give you directly evidence that there are beings like Gollum, but you might think, okay, the hypothesis that I'm using to predict the existence of all the observers like me also predicts that there would be lots of other observers who are not like me, including Gollum. But then the claim is like, it's not so, especially if you're not a materialist, it's not clear that you would need to have a being like Gollum in order to have all possible creatures, right? Because it like to instantiate all possible creatures, you just need to instantiate the essential properties or the essential natures of all possible creatures. But presumably the things that make Gollum kind of Gollumish are inessential to his existence. And so God might not create a creature like Gollum in the sense that you're talking about, because the things that make him so terrifying are not essential to his identity, presumably.
Yeah. Okay. There are more questions, but I'm curious what Matt's saying. What? Oh shit! I just unpresented.
Okay.
Wow. I was not acting in my own interest. Yeah, it sounds like he's really deep in thought. I mean, just like, is this really more productive than having a debate about the anthropic argument? If he's so right about the anthropic argument,
No, okay, look, he's destroying wizards or something. This is important. He's saving the world here.
Indeed.
I suspect he's.
Okay, let's people know. Given everyone, I'm the guy whose video Matt was just reacting to.
I have to stop taking a small theist channel's bad habit.
Given that Matt doesn't want to come on and defend his core objections,
Okay.
anyone is free to call in and defend the.
I love how the guy demonstrates just a fuck ton of confusion about every aspect of this, including the difference between a show and a debate. Thinks he is in a position to lecture me about letting people talk, when that's not the thing. He would have gotten to talk absolutely, and he did.
Well, he would monologue for 3 minutes, and then I would talk for 20 seconds, and then he would interrupt me.
Well, I called into your call-in show that you've been doing for 20 years, thinking it was going to be structured like a debate.
No, I didn't. No, I understand the show. Like, I understand that Matt didn't, care about.
Be a debate. I'd be happy to have a debate. Of the two of us, I'm the only one that's proven that they are capable of having a debate.
I've had many debates.
You haven't proven it so much.
I haven't even proven that it's possible. The debate. Okay, given that Matt doesn't want to come on and defend his, I'm not going to say poor, I'll be nicer. The objections, anyone is free to call in and defend the objections that he raised. The channel is called Deliberation Under Ideal Conditions. Once.
Been invited to debate at Oxford Union, dude.
Again, Matt.
I've debated in churches. It's just hilarious.
Would love.
If you want to debate, let's do it. If you want equal time, let's do it. That's not what you paid for. You called in for free to try to spew a useless God proposition.
Useless.
Kids would be nice if they're open to learning. Yeah, because he's sharp. He is sharp enough to understand key aspects of these things, but he
Wow.
has made errors, and once again is in the look at this.
It's intended for certain audiences.
And still, I'm happy to have him book a debate.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
I will
Right. Sounds like I'm in for a debate with Dillahunty. Nice.
Well, you need to book it first.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll email him about it. Yeah, sounds good. We'll have to figure out a time to do it. I'm happy to have it on basically any platform. I think this debate will be very funny. But oh wait, what is Cairo saying? What does he want me to send? What? Wait, does Dillahunty really only has 24 viewers? I have more viewers than him, and yet he's saying he won't debate me because I'm so irrelevant. Well, no, I mean he's saying he won't.
His viewers are much more intelligent than your viewers.
Right. They understand these things. Okay, nice. I mean, I'm excited for the debate. I think it'll be fun. Sorry, Amos, that you didn't get the chance to deal with intellectual behemoth, Matt Dillahunty.
Yeah, I could call another time.
The Twitch. If you just Google Matt Dillahunty Twitch, you'll find where he's talking about it. You want me to send the Twitch message? Okay, you know what? I'll do it. Hey, everyone. I'm the guy running the channel that Matt is currently talking. Oh, I should probably have it go.
Yeah.
Present so that you all can see what's happening. Okay. I'm the guy running the channel that Matt is currently talking about. Excited for the upcoming debate. If anyone wants to call in and discuss why you think, if anyone wants to call in who thinks Matt's arguments work, anyone is free to do so. There's a call in link below the YouTube stream. The channel is called Deliberation Under Ideal Conditions. Would love to have any of you, especially you, Matt, but also happy to wait and have a debate later.
Okay.
Okay, is that a good message?
Yeah, that sounds pleasant.
Okay. I'm a pleasant guy, you know.
Well.
Okay, let's see. I think he's going to get mad. But
you can tell him. Oh, here we go. Omniscience 8. Hey, everyone. I'm the guy running the channel that Matt is currently talking about. Excited for the upcoming debate. If anyone wants to call in who thinks Matt's arguments work, anyone is free to do so. There's a call-in link below the YouTube. Oh, you came over to my Twitch to advertise?
I did.
Would love to have any of you, especially you, Matt, but also have to. See, here's the thing, Omniscience. I don't know how long you've been here. I hope you're here. If you're listening right now, I'm happy to just explain something to you that you seem to have misunderstood. Because you are a smart guy, smarter than your friends. You have made in what I think is a fairly straightforward mistake, but you also are confused some stuff. I'm happy. As a matter of fact, I'll make you a deal I've never made anybody. You can book an online debate with me, as provided we can agree on platform and moderator. I don't care. I'm the guy who for 20 years has been going into churches with their moderators. I guess before I go on, are you listening?
Yes.
Cool. I'm going to keep this succinct. I don't dislike you. This isn't personal. I think you're smart. I think you're onto some good stuff. I think you've made some mistakes. I think you misunderstood the nature of the show. But for 20 years, not only have I been doing call-in shows, but I've also been doing big public debates. debates in front of thousands of people live and hundreds of thousand people online, and even more for the thing that I did with Jordan Peterson, which really isn't a debate, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, that's my job. I get paid for it. But on the show, there's not an equal time thing. It's not I get 5 minutes, you get 5 minutes. We gave you time to talk. And what you were advocating for was a God that I find not only completely useless and uninteresting, but you were doing it in a way that I think is particularly fallacious. And we weren't going to make headway. And on a show like that, with other callers waiting, it is much easier. We have to interrupt. We have to get clarification. We have to point out these things. It's not a debate. If you want a debate, normally you would have to book me and pay me. However, in your case, despite the fact that I think this is a useless proposition about a God, because you're not even saying God X exists. You're just saying, I think it's likely that some nebulous God with the qualities of can create humans and wants to create humans
and is
probably exists. That's the crux of this, and it's all tied to the existence of humans. Which is why you're going with anthropic. You don't have to pay me. If you want to book a debate, and it doesn't have to be the in-boss format, and it doesn't even have to be on the line. If you come up with a place and a moderator and a format that we can agree on, I will be happy. Once we work out the details, I'm happy to debate you for free. I'm not looking for money out of this. You want your first leg up and be like, ooh, I went after one of the biggest atheist debaters on the planet? Sure. You can email sans.deity@gmail.com. But when you call into the show, we gave you lots of time to talk. And the God that you're advocating for is useless. And I wonder, and think about this because it's going to be a key aspect in response to your thing. Would you agree with the following statement? That X is more probable on Y does not mean that the existence of X tells you about the probability of Y.
Well, it tells you something. It tells you that Y is more likely than it was in the absence of consideration of Y. Now, it doesn't tell you if it's overall probable. For that, you have to look at the prior probability. Now, I think there are good reasons to think that theism has a high prior probability. But yeah, it doesn't.
Isn't he waiting for you to type this in the Twitch chat? I think he's not watching you.
It tells you something about the probability, but doesn't.
Because Matthew, you're the kind of person I'd like to have discussions with. I just don't find that it tells you something about the probability, but it doesn't settle it. How can, then yes, we should discuss this because when you say it tells you something about the probability, but doesn't settle it, I agree it doesn't settle it. I don't know that it tells you anything about the probability. For example, here's a watch. We would probably all agree that the existence of this watch, or let's just say my possession of this watch, is more probable on the proposition that I had the money for the watch and wanted a watch. But so on the condition that I had the money for this watch and wanted this watch, it's therefore more probable that I would end up with a watch. But does me having this watch in any way tell you how likely it was that I had the money and wanted this watch? And the answer is no, because this watch could have been a gift. This watch could have been the wrong watch. This watch could have been one that I didn't pay for. This watch could have been one that I paid for but didn't actually want. And also, I may have wanted this watch and had the money for it, but that doesn't mean that I bought it. So, yeah. Right. So then you having the watch is evidence for you having the money and wanting it. No, it's not. Having the watch is not in any way evidence that I had the money or wanted it. And that's my point. This watch I didn't want and I didn't pay for. Having this watch does not in any way confirm or suggest that I had the money or wanted this watch. That's the mistake you're making. Once you get through that, we can get further. No, you are confusing facts that are consistent with a proposition and evidence for a proposition. I'm getting ready to do another video on this exact topic to talk about what counts as evidence for versus what is just a fact consistent with. But you are just wrong. My possession of this watch doesn't tell you if it's mine.
Yeah, so I'm not
doesn't tell you where it
confused about
comes from.
anything.
And
Evidence
while
is
Yeah, you
my
should save this
possession of this
discussion
watch
for
is
the
in
moderator
fact
debate.
more probable on the proposition that I had the money and wanted the watch, you could say, if you begin with Matt has the money and wants a watch, what's the likelihood that he's going to end up with that watch? That is the da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. You can't go backwards, and you can't say the fact that Matt had this watch tells us that he had the money and wanted it. I'm not confusing anything. Evidence is something that renders a hypothesis more likely. No, it's not. You're confusing evidence with sufficient evidence. No, I'm not confusing anything. I'm pointing out that evidence for a proposition is not the same as facts consistent with the proposition, and that you are in fact affirming the consequent fallaciously, as you did the other day, when you say that me having the watch is evidence for me having the money and wanting it. No, it's not. Just like if I take this watch out and hand it to a homeless person, their possession of this watch is not in any way evidence that they wanted it or they had the money. That is the fallacy that you were writing on, and you're doing it all to suggest a God that is probable. I'm sorry, but you've got to do more. And this is why I'm happy to do a debate, but you're not going to get equal time on a show where the job is to point out how you are wrong or where I am wrong. But I don't think it is. It's evidence not merely if it's consistent with the proposition, but if the odds of the evidence are higher than you have fundamental misunderstandings of skepticism and epistemology.
Wow.
Which I've already demonstrated. You keep going on about irrelevant things. Your statement that says,
Wow.
so then you having the watch is evidence for you having the money and wanting it. That is not true. Possession is not evidence of me wanting it or of me having the money.
I feel like
and
you
until you acknowledge that, you're going to be stuck, because that is a core flaw in what you're trying to do. You have just been falsified right here in the middle of my Twitch stream, where I'm going to go back to playing. If you want to book a debate, book a debate. If you want to reach out to me in email, let's save this for the debate. Yes, happy to. What I'm not happy to do is have people who don't understand the nature of a call-in show and how it's different from an actual debate, whining as if I was the one that was unfair.
Yeah, look, okay, I understand, you're doing this Cohen show. Blue, by the way, I had a convo with Mike Humer about it, and he had some disagreements, but he was more sympathetic than you might think. So okay, yeah, so I did run the argument by Humer. Yeah, he thought that there were only a finite number of people. I addressed that at some length possible people. I addressed that at some length in my, or Aleph Null, and I addressed that at some length in my most recent video. But I mean, my most recent article. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I'm happy to do it on lots of platforms. Yeah. Excited for the debate with Dillahunty. I did not expect that to be the result of this Cohen stream. I guess I'll address the substantive point he made where he said that I was confusing evidence with stuff consistent with the hypothesis. So I'm not confusing anything. The fact that A is consistent with B doesn't tell you if it's evidence for B. A is evidence for B if A is likely or given B, then given the falsity of B. In fact, this is just totally standard Bayesian epistemology. Something is evidence if it renders a hypothesis more likely. It's a matter of basic math and logic that if something is higher probability given A than given not A, then it renders A more likely. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we should end the stream.
Okay.
But I don't know. Do you have anything? Once again, if anyone wants to call in, you're more than free to. Would love to have you. Mm-hmm. But I guess this is a weirdly large number of viewers. Yeah, 2 base nerds. Okay, let's see. Jay and Amanda Cohen says you should ask him what evidence is then. It seems like he can't have evidence in favor of something. I don't know what. I mean, he'll usually say evidence which demonstrates something or something like that. But I don't think that's a very good definition. Not Matthew already making simple mistakes. Lol. What an imbecile. I don't know who he's talking about, being the imbecile. The objection is the many gods objection is a subjective property like tallness or goodness. What is the relation of perfection and God? Well, so I wasn't, this is something Amos and I disagree about, but I don't think God's essential property is perfection. I think his essential property is being a limitless mind. He's a mind without limits because he has no limits. There's no limits on his power or knowledge. And if there's no limits on his knowledge, then he knows all the moral facts and is motivated to follow them. Now, you might deny, right, that that's a joint carving property. You might think that maybe knowing all the moral facts, maybe morality is subjective, so knowing the moral facts wouldn't make you follow them. But all we need is this to be plausible for theism to not have a super low prior probability. And then because there's a lot of evidence in its favor from the fact that there's moral knowledge, from the fact that you in particular exist out of the infinite panoply of beings that might exist, from the fact that, there's fine tuning, from the fact that there's psychophysical harmony. Check out Amos's epic blog post.
These are my first 2 posts ever. I didn't finish the series, but you get the gist of the argument from the first 2 posts.
Yeah. My friend Apologetic Squared also has good videos about it.
He can't come on the screen because he's a stick figure.
Right. By the way, you should all check out Apologetic Squared's channel. He's just like the nicest guy and really, really smart. And he makes these like amazing videos that break down very complicated things with these like cute animated videos. Okay.
I think we got all the kind of substantive questions.
Okay, yeah, nice.
The snarky comment was about Dillahunty, not you, apparently, from Patrick.
Okay. That's a bad analogy, Patrick.
Get it together, Patrick.
Yeah. Get with the program. Skeptically pissed asks, how old are you, my guy? I am 21. Recent, newly minted 21-year-old. Why wasn't it reasonable to believe in dark matter before it was confirmed? Because it had a low prior probability. It's a pretty specific thing. You only believe in stuff with a low prior probability if you get evidence for it, where evidence is stuff that renders it more probable. And the strength of the evidence we need will depend on the prior probability. In the case of dark matter, it doesn't have that low of a prior probability, and we have lots of evidence for it.
Well, I mean, there's a famous epistemologist called Thomas Jump who has the view that it would be reasonable to believe in dark matter if you just like postulate it.
Right, make novel testable predictions.
Predictions.
Right, this is how we know lots of things about history, for example, because they make lots of novel testable prediction. Rationalists are big on Bayes until you tell them about the fine-tuning argument. This is true.
So true.
But okay, I think I don't know. Should we? Yeah.
I guess. I mean, it doesn't look like anyone's calling in. We could do it at another stream another time. I mean, we're gonna release the first episode of our new restarted podcast soon. We're gonna interview Florence Bacchus.
I'm committing the Bayes law fallacy. Okay, I think Daniel Mancuso is joking. Yeah, I think Daniel's a smart guy. Okay, Gabriel asked, why doesn't God create this planet brimming with people on every planet? Well, if what the physics seems to point to is there are infinite people, and if there are infinite people, it doesn't really matter how they're distributed. You get the same number of people whether there's life on every planet or every
the physics points to there being infinite people as opposed to the anthropic evidence.
Well, yeah, I think so.
Okay, fine.
Both of them do.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, basically the claim is like the cardinality of the people would still be the same no matter how they're distributed. So you wouldn't expect them all to all be like bunched up in one region of space.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Nice chatting, everyone. Thanks for watching. All right. I guess we'll wrap up. Amos, thank you for coming on.
Me.
Yeah. All right.
Lifetime.
Yeah. Okay. Peace out.